Hi, I'm Nick Price. I am the CEO of Bright Purple in Edinburgh, and I'm here today with Jenni Snell, who is a Senior Development Officer for Youthlink in Scotland, and we're going to talk a little bit about climate exchange and empowering young people, and there's nobody better than Youthlink Scotland to do that. So Jenni, welcome.
Hi, nice to be here.
And can you start by telling us a little bit about you, a little bit about how you got into the whole Youthlink situation and what's going on around climate for Youthlink just now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a Senior Development Officer, like you said, at Youthlink Scotland. My role there is to lead and manage our Learning for Sustainability projects. So everything from the climate change and climate action through to sustainable development education and global citizenship, and also social action and volunteering. So I have been at Youthlink for about 3 years now. It's been fantastic. But before that, I worked as a youth development officer in Aberdeen with a local authority, and have always had youth work as part of my life. So I was really lucky when I was a kid. My mum and dad were both youth workers as well, volunteer youth workers, and shared great stories, got us involved in local youth groups in our local town and bigger. And I was part of uniformed organisations as well, like Guides and Girls' Brigade. So I've always had youth work as part of my blood, I suppose. And then I was really, really fortunate when I went to university. I studied French as my undergrad. I got a part-time job as a youth worker in the local authority, and I had a fantastic line manager who showed me that there's future career opportunities in youth work, which wasn't something that I think your careers advisor would really tell you about when you're at school. So I was delighted that there was kind of pathways into full-time employment, and did my postgrad in community learning development, my master's in youth work, and then started to work within the team doing youth work in schools, so managing those projects before moving to Youthlink. So got a strong core history of youth work.
Well, it sounds like you're a bit of an expert on youth, that's for sure. And just define Youthlink. What's the age group that Youthlink covers, I suppose?
Yeah, so youth work in Scotland, we tend to work with young people from the age of 12 to 25. So it goes a bit older. If you're thinking about Europe, it's up to 30, but in Scotland we tend to work within that kind of 12 to 25 parameter.
Right, that's me out of the picture then. Thanks for that.
Me too, though.
I know you're a volunteer at something that I've never even heard of, 2050 Climate Group. So first of all, tell us about 2050 Climate Group, because it sounds fascinating. What is it?
Yeah, 2050 Climate Group is a predominantly volunteer-led and a youth-led charity. So it works with young people across Scotland through a number of different projects, so policy projects and kind of summit projects, leaders network projects, right through to kind of a young leaders development project, which is the group that I volunteer with. And they empower, equip and enable young people to take climate action, so to better understand the climate crisis and to be able to take action within their personal, professional and political lives.
Wow. And how was that founded? Is it a government-led project, or what is it?
So I think it was originally founded by Young Scot. So I know Young Scot were definitely involved in the kind of the lead up of the project, but then shifted into that youth-led, so youth-owned charity. So they still get support from organisations. It's funded by a number of different organisations, Baillie Gifford, Scottish Government, trying to think who else.
Yeah, there's
lots of different organisations, but essentially, it's youth-led now, and it's a kind of a volunteer-led charity, which is really amazing. So
yeah, good. And it's, I know that we were talking earlier. You were saying that actually climate change was not a passion that you had, even though you were involved in youth work. Climate change wasn't a passion. So I suppose what's changed for you, and how did the sustainability climate change program kick off for you, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. So climate change wasn't something that I think we really spoke about around the table when we were eating dinner. It wasn't a topic that was like hugely immersed in my life when I was growing up. I knew it was an issue, but I didn't feel like I had the skills or the knowledge to take action on it. I thought you had to be a climate scientist, and I think that a lot of people think that you need to fully understand the facts behind climate change to get involved in it. So it wasn't until I actually became involved in 2050. So I took part in their Young Leaders Development Programme myself, went through that whole process, and it was really transformational, because I saw that actually the young people that were on that programme alongside me were from all different walks of life, all different backgrounds, and that actually everybody has a role to play in tackling climate change. It doesn't matter if you're an environmental scientist or a teacher or a youth worker or working in a corporate bank. Everybody can take action. So that was where it really started. So yeah, 2050 was my catalyst. So yeah, a lot of credit to them for that.
Yeah, and obviously the future about empowering young people to not only climate change, but many other subjects as well. But we're here talking about climate change. Do you think that then, you said that you weren't taught the importance of climate change, obviously, around the kitchen table. Do you think that the message is still trying to find its way out there when it comes to empowering young people?
To a certain extent, yes. I think that the digital media and social media has definitely opened up the world to young people in a way that was never there when I was a young person. So young people are opening their phones and seeing these issues on a daily basis. And I think that can be quite overwhelming for them actually as well. They see that information, and if they've not had the education and the support to process those emotions, it could be quite overwhelming. It feeds into climate anxiety, climate overwhelm, climate delay, all those sorts of emotions. But I think there is a lot of people. There's in Scotland, the kind of curriculum and education is all kind of focused around the Sustainable Development Goals now, which is fantastic. But there's still a gap in terms of young people whose voices are maybe less heard around those decision making. So more marginalised communities across Scotland, across the world, who, in terms of climate justice, they will be the young people and the generation that will be impacted most by the impacts of climate change. But maybe his voices aren't heard, and they've got other issues to deal with. They're thinking about, I don't know, poverty. They're dealing with, their own. There's lots of different issues going on just now around, racism, like drugs, substance misuse, all of those kind of topics that actually are impacting young people's lives at an individual level. That maybe the climate crisis is something that they can't quite connect with, and it's just too big for them when you've got those kind of individual things going on in their
And it is a
lives.
big subject, obviously, because we're I think we started off by talking about plastic. The world started talking about plastic was the problem, but I've been on lots of calls recently where everything's a problem. It's all a problem, isn't it? And
Yeah,
I can imagine that older people, the older generation like myself, we seem to be kind of pushing the burden down to say that young people are going to be the answer. But you mentioned something when we were talking a while back, when you said that it's their future that's in jeopardy, which is quite a strong wake-up call for somebody like myself with a family. And do you mentioned climate anxiety, something I didn't really know existed, to be honest. Is that something that young people really are starting to suffer from?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think like when I was a young person, I was thinking about, your usual teenage topics, like let's pass my exams, where am I going on Saturday, like that sort of thing. I wasn't thinking of the world is ending. I'm seeing these massive floods across Europe, forest fires, like absolutely catastrophic, world events happening. Yeah. And that's my future, though that is must be so terrifying for young people to be looking at that and knowing that we're at the kind of last opportunity to make a change as well. We're running out of time as a planet to reverse those effects. So yeah, climate anxiety, climate overwhelm, massive issues. We're hearing it a lot from young people. I think the recent Scottish household survey, actually, it was 96% of young people are really concerned about the impacts of climate change. So it's massive, and I think we need to work with young people. We need to support them and reframe that narrative. So we've not ran out of time yet. We are running out of time, but we're not there yet. So we can still be focusing a little bit more on climate optimism, supporting young people to think about solution, focused responses to this, working with them to take action in a way that's safe and healthy for them, but also avoiding that activism burnout as well, and lessening that pressure off their shoulders. And I think that's where youth work can come in really great with that, working with young people on the ground.
And obviously activism, it seems to be flavour of the month just now. Either people are blocking roads, or they're gluing themselves to trains and planes. And we've obviously had Greta Thunberg, and her document, I Am Greta, was fascinating, and especially coming from my senior age group, looking at somebody so young when I got children of my own at that age. Do you see a rise in this climate activism from the young, being super passionate about it? I know that obviously you've talked about this strike action that schools take, etc. Do you see that activism becoming a stronger way that kids seem, or young people seem to be getting their voices across?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's different layers of activism as well. So you've got quite high level activism, such as the Fridays for Future strikes, where young people are getting out there, they're protesting, they're using their voice and literally kind of marching with their feet. And you've got other types of activism as well. So you've got more local kind of community activism and social action happening in the ground. You've got digital campaigning and digital activism. So young people using their voices digitally through social media, so TikTok videos and Instagram kind of campaigns as well. So it's definitely risen, and not just on climate change either, but I think just generally. I mean, we see the Black Lives Matter movement. There's a lot of like period poverty campaigns. There's a number of different issues that young people are focusing on and having their voices heard.
Have you been out there with marching with your boots?
I have actually, yeah. I was out there. The young people called on organisations to stand with them. So yeah, Youthlink, we were there. We answered their call.
Good for you. And what have you found to be the most, I suppose, effective ways of engaging and empowering young people in this whole giant debate around climate?
So coming from a youth work perspective, so the kind of fundamental principles of youth work is starting from where young people are at, and that the kind of projects or the work that we undertake is youth led and it's voluntary, so the young people are choosing to be there. And I think that starting from where young people are at point is really important, especially when we think about climate change, like a global issue like that, because young people are not just one homogenous group. They're not all at the same point of their journey. They're at different stages. They've got different levels of engagement. They've got different priorities and competing. There's so much going on in their life. So we need to start from where they're at and relate it back to that local, I think. So working with them in their local communities so that they don't feel overwhelmed. Because if you go into a youth group or a group of young people and say, right, we're going to tackle the climate crisis, I think, where do you start? So making it local, making it relevant to them. So stuff like the Sustainable Development Goals framework is really useful for having those conversations, because it interlinks all the different global issues that are happening. And yeah, just starting from where they're at and making sure that they're involved in the process from the beginning as well. So we don't want them to be a tokenistic tick box exercise. Young people can see that a mile off. They know if they've just been brought in for a tokenistic tick box exercise, there's nothing worse. So having young people involved from that very beginning of the process, in Young Scot, one of the charities that we work with really closely, they do an amazing job with that through their co-design programmes. Having young people basically involved in all aspects of the process.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the tick box situation, isn't it? Because, I mean, I don't know the groups obviously that you're engaging with, but again, just watching the Greta documentary, I almost felt like, and I think she almost felt like she was a token at some of these meetings where some of the senior leaders of the world invited her along to speak. But I almost felt from watching her, you could see her own anxiety at the fact that she probably felt that, am I just here to boost the numbers, basically?
Absolutely,
And I can imagine,
voice.
and I can imagine that is a problem for young people. Do they feel like we are listening? We, as in the older generation.
I think in some cases, yes. So in Scotland, we were really lucky. In 2018, we had Year of Young People, which was a whole year celebrating young people, and a lot of doors were opened during that year in terms of youth participation and youth decision making that are difficult to be closed now, and definitely decision makers and in local governments and national government in Scotland do listen to young people. They do fund programs for young people to get involved, and they are thinking about that on a meaningful level, but I think there's still more to be done. There's definitely more collaborative work with young people that can be done. So like using a co-design process with them, so that it's not young people being invited along to a formal meeting room to give responses, and it's not their kind of setting, but actually going to where young people are at, working with them, collaborating, and meaningfully listening to them. There was a really great example of that recently. It was actually Mary McCallan, so the SNP MSP for Clydesdale, went along to a youth group in North Lanarkshire to meet them in their local park and stuff and have a conversation there where they're at. So there's some really great examples of it happening out there, but yeah, definitely can do more.
Good. And I know you've got the Scottish COP Youth Summit happening, I think, this week. So tell us more about that. Tell us more about how that project came about, and I also understand it's got 4 pillars that set it out. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the COP26 Scottish Youth Climate Programme is one of the Scottish Government's flagship programmes in the lead up to and beyond COP. So it's fully funded by Scottish Government, and it's ourselves at Youthlink Scotland working on it with Young Scot and Keep Scotland Beautiful. So 3 kind of charity organisations working with young people to create a legacy of COP26. So the 4 pillars of activity that we're working on are the COP26 co-design group. So Young Scot are supporting 50 young people in Scotland to co-design all aspects of the programme, from the summit that you just mentioned through to training for other young people, through to the content that will go out through our social media channels. The second pillar of activity is our local champions programme. So that is 10 local champions per local authority in Scotland, and their role is to kind of showcase and amplify and create climate action in local communities. So in the lead up to COP, but also beyond as well, and creating that legacy at a local level. The third pillar is the Youth Work Champions programme. So that's where Youthlink is really involved in. We're there to support youth workers' capacity building, to make sure that they're equipped and enabled to support more young people across Scotland take action. So we're supporting them through climate emergency training with Keep Scotland Beautiful. We've developed toolkits for them, social media kind of campaign packs, extra funding on the ground for them to deliver climate action projects, lots of kind of things to make sure youth workers feel equipped to support young people. And then the final pillar is the summit, which is happening on Saturday, which is super exciting. It's going to be a whole day online. Young people from across Scotland are joining, hundreds of young people, and they'll be taking part in workshops during that summit to create Scotland's Youth Climate Declaration. So
that sounds intense. What's that? What's a climate declaration?
Climate declaration. So basically, young people will be working with expert kind of workshop leaders from different topics, different themes, different sectors across Scotland. So just transition, biodiversity, rural issues, food, transport, children's rights, to create statements that come from young people themselves that will all be combined into a youth climate declaration that we can then support young people to use as a framework beyond COP to say, this is what Scotland's young people want to see. Local decision makers, national decision makers, businesses, everyone who'll listen, this is what Scotland's young people want. Here's our declaration. Will you endorse it? So yeah, that's going to be a fantastic output.
Sounds intense.
Yeah, intense. There's going to be a film version of it as well. So the young people
really?
are going to actually not just write their climate declaration, but film themselves speaking it as well. So it'll be a really great output. Yeah.
And actually, just talking about young people and I suppose how they're looking up to Greta is coming back to Greta. She's kind of their age group. But are there people in the world that are doing something, and young people are not aspiring to? That's the wrong thing. But are young people looking up to them and saying, well, there are people actually out there trying to do something? Do you know if there are people out there that?
Oh, but yeah, there'll be people everywhere. We were recently involved in some work with Edinburgh University. We went to one of their conferences and spoke there, and there was young people from Indigenous groups in America who are doing some amazing activism work over there. Same in Australia, you know, there's young people from across the world. Malawi, Scotland has a really strong partnership with Malawi, and the Scotland-Malawi partnership. We recently had 2 young climate activists speak at our Youthlink Scotland conference on the work that they're doing in Malawi. There's incredible examples, and I think COP26 and the COI16 conference, which is happening just now, and that's the kind of youth version of COP26, is such a great way to bring those voices together and to learn from each other, and for young people to kind of feel inspired by what else is happening, but also have that sense of solidarity that they're not just on their own, and they're part of a global movement, which is really nice.
And if people are watching just now and they've got young people in their lives, their own children, I'm sitting here with you, thinking I've got to go away and do quite a bit of work, to be honest, but around my own understanding. But what advice would you give them to support these young people through the whole thinking about climate? Because you've mentioned obviously climate anxiety, but what advice would you give my generation for the people that we are supporting, to get them involved in climate, to get them thinking about it, to get them active, I suppose?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Greta Thunberg hits it on the nail on the head when she says no one's too small to make a difference. So I'm not going to pinch that line, but I think it is a great quote, and I think reassuring young people that, they can make a difference, and that we're meaningfully listening to their concerns and we're acting on them. So, leading by example is something that I feel really strongly about. At Youthlink, we're trying to do that, not just for young people, but for the whole youth work sector, is leading by example and showcasing, this is what we can do, this is what can be done, and this is how you can be a part of it. So I think that, really meaningfully listening to young people, starting from where young people are at, and just building their confidence and self-belief that no one is too small to make a difference.
And I suppose finally, if we've got COP coming, we've got 25,000 people from around the world coming to Glasgow and to Scotland. What's your own personal hopes for COP? I mean, we've heard all about it being a token shop, but for you, what do you hope comes from COP26?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I mean, I hope that we, as a legacy of COP26, we see a world that is kinder, more sustainable, fairer and equitable. So not just focusing on the green changes that need to be made in terms of tackling the climate crisis, but ensuring that that's a just process and that climate justice is at the heart of that. So we know that young people and other communities of across the world are going to be more impacted than others. And I think we need a really fair, equitable, inclusive resolution beyond COP26. So that's a fair, kind, sustainable world post COP26.
A very positive thing to finish on, actually.
Climate optimism.
Well, we've gone from climate anxiety to climate optimism. That's a good way to finish, actually.
Yeah.
Jenni, thank you so much for joining me, and it's been a real pleasure.
Thank you for
having me. I'm glad you're shaking hands, because I'm back to hugging, so that's great.
Yeah.
So, thanks very much, Jenni.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.